I know Eric came along. I couldn't leave him here on his own, so I said I'd take a fine for it.
Free Julian Assange now. We need him very much because without the truth being told, we'll believe the lies. Remember, that's Nazi Germany, you know? The truth couldn't be told.
We're here for Eric Levy, who's a human rights activist. Eric's been campaigning for human rights all his life. He's been around the world and was a human shield in Iraq and the Gaza Strip. He's been to the Congo, he's been to Cuba, and he's wanting to alleviate the suffering of all the oppressed people everywhere. For the past 5 or 10 or 15 years, I'm not quite sure how long, he's been supporting the Julian Assange campaign. I would guess it's about 12 years now, and supporting free speech and free press. And Eric is in hospital now, which was just for a routine fall where he knocked his head, and he's been here 8 weeks. So every week we try and get him out of hospital and say he's declining while he's in hospital. Let's get him back home where he's independently living and he can stay strong and not go into a vegetative state with over-medicated situation. Anyone that goes into a hospital at 94 years old, let me warn you, be aware. You are on the high point score list of those who are going to receive these end-of-life cocktails. This is a financial consideration for the NHS, and we don't want to leave any older person unsupervised in hospital. This is a palliative care report that was written in 2010 that talks about how expensive end-of-life care is. So we've been very closely watching Eric and asking, why are you keeping him in so long?
Over the last few weeks, I've been visiting Eric. I was told that he had a fall. I thought he was okay and getting looked after in hospital. But what seemed to happen is when I went in, he couldn't feed himself. The food that they were giving him was like jelly, Angel Delight and Muller rice, sugars. So I started feeding him with homemade soup for 4 days. He sat up in the bed. He was able to feed himself. He was able to move his hands. Doctors then took me into a room and told me Eric is very sick. He has a valve problem in his heart and we're going to put him on end of life. And I said, but he's recovering. Like, he's sitting up and he can eat now. And they said, oh, I know, but he's very sick. And I said, we're going to put him on end of life. But end of life, you don't just kill somebody. If you have a heart valve problem, then you die of a heart attack or a stroke or whatever else. And at home with the people that care for you and want to be with you. But unfortunately with Eric, when they start saying that they're going to give him this end of life, I said, no, you can't do it. And Jill was instrumental as well. So I said, we'd have to come down here and protest that they don't just kill Eric. He's not a dog, he's a man. If he has a heart valve problem, they're not going to fix it. It's not going to get better. But he doesn't have to die in hospital of a because they have him in a COVID ward and now we can't go in and see him. They gave him pneumonia in there, they gave him bed sores, and the bed sores then gave him blood infections. They nearly killed him 3 times in there.
Every week they tell us we're going to discharge him next week, and it doesn't happen. They keep delaying it. Now, to be fair, I understand legally they're worried about releasing a 94-year-old and then being sued if he goes home and drops dead the next day or something, and they made a mistake. But with him and with a heart condition, anything can happen at any time. You can't just keep him bedbound for the rest of his life just so he doesn't drop dead walking around. Eric wouldn't want that. So he asked me 3 weeks ago to call the police and to get him out of there. And he said, if you're my friend, you will get me out of here. And then he gave me a piece of paper and he said, okay, if you won't get me out, give this paper to a stranger on the street and just ask them to come up toward T10. And he put his bed number and the floor and everything. And he said, have a stranger come and get me out of here. But they're killing me. They're giving me drugs that are making making me weak. He said, I want to go home, get me out of here, get the police here to get me out. Now, when somebody's saying that to you, who's your friend, you can imagine how hard you work, even harder, to make sure you get them out, and you find out, why are they giving him these weird drugs?
We want him out in a care home or in his own home so that we can look after him and have occupational therapists come and, you know, rather than let him die inside the hospital. Eric is a 94-year-old man that's been out more than me. He inspired me to come out with the whole Julian Assange when I saw him on Willsy's channel. And here we are trying to save a man inside a hospital because, as they said, that they're giving incentives to doctors to kill people, to put them on end-of-life care, because of course if they're dead you don't have to pay for them tomorrow and you have an empty bed. It's the same with all the drugs that they give to doctors and things. They incentivize you. You can have air miles if you get so much, sell so much anidine, so much Viagra, or whatever else. They give them incentives. You have to get over so many. And it was the same with the you know?
We've been on the wards when he's just been looking at the ceiling and his mouth is stuck open and his hands are like claws holding on to the rails, and he's clearly in a stupor from some kind of drug that they've given him. Can I prove anything? No, but there is a dangerous drug, or as they call it, controlled drug log, that legally they have to keep on the ward, and if somebody requests to see that, who's a medical professional, they have to show it to them. There's also a prescription drug log where they would have to show what prescription drugs they've been given to him. So basically, we want to hold the NHS, particularly his doctors here at UCL Hospital, to stand by their word that he's going to be released this week. I had a long conversation with Eric's doctor yesterday, and she assured me he's going home next week. Now, she thinks he doesn't have long to live. So they're basically sending him home, in her eyes probably, to die. But I think Eric's going to bounce back. We're not going to push him, but we're going to allow him to do what he wants. So if he wants to go in a wheelchair and go out to a protest, we'll push him in the wheelchair. A bit of sunshine and fresh air should be good. He's not hooked up to any machines, so he doesn't need to stay in bed all day. He can't walk because he's obviously too weak at the moment, and he may never walk again because maybe his heart's too dodgy. But he can still be alive. Eric has told me in no uncertain terms to make sure everyone knows he wants to live as long as he possibly can.
There's about 500,000 people every year who are, I would say, killed by the NHS system. Some of them, of course, are definitely going to die, but a good proportion are dying when they shouldn't die. And case Eric is one example. We know of another one. Mark, if you know him, his mother. She was basically killed by this procedure going on end-of-life care. And I'm saying that this isn't just actually about old people. They've also now a new medical tyranny developing where they've been using mental health issues against people who are actually not, you know, inadequate. Like Simon, as you know, the guy campaigning outside the Downing Street for years. Not years, well, a year actually. He's now in mental institution in the Manchester area. Now, I've spoken to him on the phone when he was inside, there was nothing wrong with him. But when they start injecting people like that with things, then they appear to be ill. And the same has been happening to Eric, although they've stopped injecting him now a bit because we've been here. So, you know, there's a new medical tyranny going on to imprison people, either through a euthanasia program for older people, or other people under mental health, where, quite frankly, some of them are going to die for this, but they're being held indoors when they should be outdoors.
Corporations have infiltrated both the government and NHS. NHS is a big, huge corporation, basically, you know, run by the government, and it's being privatized throughout with their catering, their porters, their cleaners, all going out to outside agencies. Of course, the workers aren't getting all the money. The corporations are that run them and get the contracts. Where are they getting the contracts from? getting them from politicians and stuff, aren't they? That I think are getting backhanders, in my opinion, because they're corrupt. All the governments are corrupt, and corporations have now infiltrated into government, and you can see this in like a movie, The Corporation, documentary movie, and the sequel, The Corporation, The Embarrassing Truth. And a corporation is a person in law, and if you what they call a personal, do you know when they do a psychological test on a person? A corporation hits every 14 points of a psychopath. And the worst psychopath that they know in humanity hits 9 points, not 14. So we're allowing corporations to infiltrate government, NHS. They're psychopaths. Profit over people. And this is happening all around us. Like, how much do you think it costs to put a in a person? They have to manufacture it, they have to make a profit on it, they have to send it, they have to refrigerate it, they then have to pay someone to administrate it, then get rid of all the tests, or you know, all this kind of thing. So it's money. Corruption and greed, it's the downfall of men, and we have to unite together, people, because you know, unless we come out and do things like this, Eric will be dead. That's what they told me last week. We're thinking of putting him on end of life because he has a heart problem. Well, let him die of a heart problem then. You don't put him down. He's sitting up in bed chatting to me, telling me all about his life, eating himself, where when they were feeding him, he wasn't getting anything. And you know, there's not so many nurses up there anymore because of the mandates. They've all left, so you might have one nurse on the whole wards, and they're looking after maybe 10, 20, 30, 40, 60 patients. There's about one nurse, and all the rest are care workers. So of course care workers get paid less than nurses because they're not qualified. They just get told to do it and they do it.
So you call this state imprisonment then? It
is state imprisonment. It's a new medical tyranny, and it involves old people and people who they accuse of being mentally ill.
Is there an economic reason why they're targeting elderly people?
Yeah, well, it saves a lot of money.
Yeah.
Well, it saves money to the state in ongoing pensions, and it gives a lot of money to Big Pharma for the administration of and other things, which are end-of-life drugs. In other words, they're killing people with them. It's an abomination we ought to address, and it is all part of the movement. It's part of the New World Tyranny.
Would you agree that this is state imprisonment?
I definitely agree. And he has tried to sign himself out, and I've been there and said to the nurses he wants to sign himself out. And they told me he can't because the doctor signed a certificate of mental competency assessment saying he was not of sound mind. This is ridiculous. He speaks 3 languages to the nurses every day. He converses with everybody. When they give him drugs, is he still lucid? No. Did they interview him after he was drugged? Maybe. But no doctor would interview that man and say he failed his competency test. So that is definitely, to me, sounding like they are holding him there against his will, which is why we're out here. We've declined to do this for the past 4 weeks because we wanted to give the hospital a chance to do the right thing and release him. But when it becomes obvious that too much time has passed and it's just not going to happen naturally, then you have to step up and do something like this.
We heard some people talking out there. I wasn't in the conversation, but they said, oh yes, there are the person, yeah, he's there. Oh, and now he's going to go on palliative care, as if that's a kind of thing that has to happen. But actually, it's a choice by some medical administrator, bureaucrat that says, oh yeah, well, okay, now a palliative care. Well, that's death. I mean, you know, and a lot of families accept that as if it's inevitable, but no, these things are not inevitable. I mean, I would say about hospitals, the best thing is to avoid going into them, especially if you're old. Now, I was in one last week for some reasons which were justifiable, but I must say I was a bit apprehensive. But I think because they knew who I was, everyone knew who I was, they're all watching what's going on, I came out quickly. But otherwise, I don't know, 75, what you do, you know what I mean? And they say this person's organs are failing. I've heard those sort of stories when they haven't been true.
Eric has a lot of life left in him. He should be respected when he says he wants to go home. And I really think once this campaign was over, I've learned so much doing this, I realize how elders care is a really hot issue. And these people are not listened to, they're devalued, and And this doctor that I'm talking of, she told me 3 weeks ago that they were going to send him for end-of-life care. So if I arrived, she was only telling me, because I'm not next of kin, but she was only telling me because she knows I come to see Eric every day. And she said, well, in case you come and you see the bed's empty, I don't want you to think, where's Eric? So I'm just telling you, we would be taking him somewhere for end-of-life care. I said, what does that mean? She said, well, we're going to take him somewhere to die.
So they were going to not tell his support system, which is a very strong support system, that you said that you're feeding him, clothing him.
Right. Ray decorated his flat, we moved him, we do everything.
Keeping him positive.
Buy him his shoes, yeah.
And they wanted to take him away, not even tell his support system that, and euthanize him.
And not even tell him. He said he had no idea. He said they told him he was being discharged.
So they lied to him?
Yeah, she told me that she had discussed it with Eric and that he knew he was going for end-of-life care. I said, I think you have to be specific when you tell him what end-of-life care is, because when you tell me that, I don't realize that means giving him a cocktail of end-of-life drugs like and morphine and hexaparadol and any of the other drugs they put in there with it.
Well, it's very euphemistic, isn't it? It sounds as if they're going to keep him sort of comfortable and do the best they can for him as he's dying, but what it actually means is they're going to murder him.
Yes, if you watch, I don't know if you've seen the film, it's called A Good Death. And it's a woman called Jackie Devoy. And it's on the David Icke's channel, Iconic. It's also on BitChute, and it's called A Good Death. And they talk about 3 particular cases where the parents of these 3 people were just euthanized and they had no idea what was happening, nothing. And when I saw that, and then I contacted one of the guys in the film, and he's a medical researcher since that happened to his parents. He made it his full-time job. He couldn't believe that he said he's seen cases where they're discharging him, and as they're going out the door, and they're dead within 24 hours, and they find out it was
Is it not better that they are able to choose to be at home and die if they're dying with their family rather than in a state institution like a hospital?
We know Eric's been depressed in there for a while. We know some days he hasn't been very coherent, but we know when Jill goes to him and talks to him, he becomes coherent. And we know when he heard that we were outside and we sent it on a telephone up to him, he was overjoyed. He became, you know, really alive and amazing, you know what I mean? So it's all a question of your environment, how you feel about life, actually. It's not just a thing about chemicals in your body. It's about everything, the whole your part in the whole of life around you.
Do you think that the medical industry has sort of lost that sense of humanity?
Completely. Yeah, I mean, Heike was making this point and I was making this point, but we've got to have a health service which puts health and well-being first and does not stand to gain anything from Big Pharma. As it is, we have a Big Pharma administration industry. Anything they do is to spend more on drugs and basically make people ill so they become more drug dependent. And at some point it becomes better investment in giving money to Big Pharma than to allow people to have a pension. That is what is going on, and there's accountants in Whitehall who are working this out all the time.
This is happening, and that all the deaths, we all heard how Matt Hancock bought something like 10 times the normal amount of was all gone within a 1-year period. So like 10 years supply gone in 1 year. I mean, the deaths worldwide, I think, are somewhere in the 6 million range. And it's untalked about. If you say, when somebody tells me, I know because I'm a doctor, the first thing I said is, oh, let's talk about and they walk away. They just have a face like thunder and they turn and walk away because they know. We've quoted this document, the Palliative Care Review, which was drafted at King's College Hospital, King's College University, by the team there, Tim Holt, Catherine Davies, and Sir Alan Kraft, I think was his name. And they published it in 2010. It's a 20-year plan that takes us from 2010 to 2030. And they're on target every year for their 450,000 elderly and disabled. So each doctor is incentivized if they get the done as quickly as possible, and they're not asking permission. They're just putting people through these procedures. I mean, you can't believe it's real, but it's true. And this document outlines how the doctors are incentivized, and how the even extends to hospices and nursing homes. So if they don't, their funding is decreased. So they all have financial gains to be made by doing it as quickly as possible, because they said deaths shouldn't cost this much. They want to reduce the cost of each death. So for the time that they know this person is going to be terminal, they just want, boom, get it over with within weeks, rather than let it stretch on for a year. That's not their choice. You know, how dare they decide when your mother's going to die?
I mean, I'm a mathematician, but I'll never get involved in that type. Well, I'm a physicist, but, you know, physicists and mathematicians get involved in these sort of things. Oh, what's best? You know, are we going to spend this much on a pension or that much on killing somebody? That's what it means.
And some people just refuse to believe that this could be happening, that medical professionals participate in this. But it's all documented. It's in black and white. And there's doctors, a guy called, I quoted his name, Rob George. He worked here at UCL. These were some of the founders of the end-of-life care. Rob George is probably the palliative care expert that everybody knows worldwide. He's on film going around talking in New Zealand at a conference where he's teaching them how to do these cocktails of, you know, fast deaths in a hospital. And he's talking that he himself has supervised more than 27,000 of these.
It's mass murder.
Yeah. So I call him Dr. Death. He's Professor Rob George. He's at King's College now, is my understanding. But he was here from in the 80s. At the AIDS time was when he kind of joined here and got involved in the palliative care and euthanasia. And he was here till 2003. There's also a guy that was here called Andrew Savitsky, who's a known eugenist. And he was working on that principle here, and then he was hired by Boris and Dominic Cummings to advise Downing Street on eugenics and how the policies could save the government money. And then he was dismissed quickly because not just being a eugenist, but he said that race definitely determines intellect. And he was one of those. So people just demanded, you can't hire this guy to work and have the public pay for it, because he's clearly got a racist issue and he's a eugenist. Get rid of him. So Boris had to get rid of him, but he was hired to advise the government.
It's euthanasia. Well, they believe in euthanasia. Boris Johnson believes in euthanasia. University College before the war was at the forefront of the euthanasia movement. All that nonsense which led to fascism. The University College was that, and that was meant to be. It was one of the first non-religious universities, right? I mean, and they were doing that. So, you know, you've got to think, people are surprised that doctors are doing these things, but actually it's not new. Doctors, scientists have gone down this road before because they feel above it, they feel above the law. They feel they can tell people what's right and what's wrong, who lives and who dies. In fact, even Gordon Brown, at the start of all this, he said, we are deciding who's living, who's going to live and who's going to die. He went to a G7 summit, or one of those ones, saying that. I don't know if he was proud of it or what, I don't know. But you know, these guys are megalomaniacs.
Elder care is an issue that we really have to bring to the forefront and talk about it openly, so everybody should be aware of what's happening. Mark there had his mother killed in the hospital very recently. I don't know if he'll want to talk about that, but you know, people are drugged all the time and the kids are going to visit them. The kids don't even know what's happening until it's too late. And they say like, hang on, my mom walked in fine a month ago. How can she be dying now? There was just one little complaint that she had. Why is she dying? And it's too late sometimes when they finally realize there's something fishy going on. So I know there's lots of great people in the NHS who have no idea that this kind of thing goes on, and they think they're just doing a great job and doing the best they can. And the NHS should be the jewel in the crown. That people can get free health care. You know, you tell that to people in the United States and they would say it's a dream. There's so many people there with no insurance because they can't afford $4,000 a month or $2,000 a month to have a plan that actually covers all the occurrences, you know, that they might need for health care.
Once you come in, that's it, it's game over. If you're not earning, once you stop earning enough money for them, they will look and go, right, this person can't earn us any more money anymore. To the state, let's get rid of them slowly, and that's how they're doing it. And it's so sad to see people falling for it.
We are not going to stop this protest. We'll still be here next week if Eric's not out. So we're going to, they've told us he's coming out next week. If he's not discharged and he's not out next week, we'll be back here.
Eric Levy! Your man has got to be free. No mercy for Eric Levy. This young man has got to be free.